Okay, hello everybody. I'm Fabi from The Next Big Rush, and today I have a very, very special guest with me. His name is Nick, and he's at Mining Book Guy. You can follow him on YouTube, on Twitter, and just pretty much everywhere. He has a very, very different point of view in how you can pick your own stocks. We pick stocks in a completely different manner, and we're going to go into that today, so you can have sort of a more global view of, hey, you can go down this route or this different route. And as far as I know, both approaches are working very well. Our stocks are way up high compared to, I'd say, last year for sure. And we're going to get right into it. Nick, I know you know a lot about African mining stocks and things like that, but tell me, how did you get interested in investing itself? I mean, you look like a very young guy. How would you get interested in that?
Oh, thanks for that great intro, Fabi. And yeah, we'll go back a few years. I was in college in the early 2000s, and around 2004, I started to get interested in business. And I actually, didn't go into college being interested in that, but I was trying to, figure out ways to learn more. And I joined the finance club at school. Unfortunately, it was kind of like disbanded and trying to kind of grow again. And there were only three or four of us. And, for better or worse, first people picked me to be the new president, and I didn't know, a single thing about finance at the time. And so, one thing led to another. I just had to kind of, teach myself. And it's kind of the same thing I do today with mining stocks. But back then it was, picking up books, going to the library, buying some of them, reading all the stuff that you can see are the typical intro books in finance. But it was great. I picked up a lot over, the following year. And then the big deal to me was just, starting to follow stock prices. It's addictive. It's really, fascinating. And of course, it's even better when you're starting to make money and stuff. So, one thing led to another, and that was kind of how it started. Yeah.
Cool. You said it's kind of addicting. I'm assuming that early on you must have picked something that worked.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more of that early history with investing.
Yeah, so like I dabbled in a few different stocks, and had a few like small winners here and there, but the big one for me was actually Nintendo, and this is a very timely to bring this up because people just can't seem to stop talking about it with all this Pokemon stuff, which I haven't participated in myself, but it is pretty cool to go to like a park and you see everybody doing it. So it's amazing. But what's really important is that at that time, it was, funny, almost exactly 10 years ago. And I distinctly remember how Nintendo was struggling. And the key thing for me was just kind of seeing that Nintendo Wii was going to be huge before like anyone else really was aware of it. I mean, you could kind of see that in the stock price. And they had other stuff like the Nintendo DS. But that was very informative because it was more than just looking at those typical financials. It was kind of like, envisioning the future a little bit, kind of predicting things. And, whether luck was the bigger part of it or it was actually skill to some degree, it worked. Like this, it was just crazy. It went up like 5 times in a year. Wow. And it was cool too that it wasn't the typical type of stock. It was it wasn't a penny stock, but it was a pink sheet that a lot of Americans didn't even realize they could invest in. I mean, it's the same thing today, but like there were so many elements where like I felt really good about myself, and I was part of this club, and more people were joining the club, and like people are like, oh, Nick, you're like so smart, you picked this thing. now that gets into like the negative side of the story later on, but anyway, that's the one that really, made it for me. Like, it was such a big deal to put some real money into it, what I had at the time, and actually get some profits. So yeah.
Sure. And let me see if I got this right. While most other kids were trying to buy the Wii, were trying to buy a piece of the company that was selling the Wii and making a lot more profit instead of just wasting time. Not that playing games is always a waste of time. It can be fun too. But that, I think, shows a little bit of the way that your brain works, because it was sort of counterculture, to, like you said, it was like pink sheets. It wasn't, the hot stock that everybody is now talking about with the Pokemon Go. It was sort of you went in really early, and saw this massive trend that really made the returns. I'm sure that after that, you must have had something that didn't work as well. I mean, come on, you can't have a perfect
Oh,
record. Tell us about something that went horribly wrong.
oh, like you are right on in terms of like the sequence of events. I mean, and you're right. It was very contrarian for Nintendo to work, but of course, I thought I was a genius, like many people do after their first big win, and yeah, it was pretty crazy. I had so much money in Nintendo, and I actually got out at the right time. But the reason I got out was because I was moving all that money into what I thought would be the next big winner. And this one doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, it literally
Wow,
like
like
blew
it
up.
blew up.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing left. Like this was a true, there's a real company here, and pff, it like disappeared. Like got delisted and everything. That one is called Uwink. And you can find it like on Wikipedia. There's a history of how it collapsed. I mean, if you want to
Wow.
follow the rise and fall, and that's actually it's a great segue because that was my first real penny stock. Like this was a true penny stock. This is OTC listed, over the counter in the U.S. and that's it was exciting because I realized the smaller companies, even though I did well with Nintendo, the smaller ones are the ones where you really could make 10 times or 20 times your money, whether it's mining stocks or whatever. And so I got really deep into it. And for better or worse, the kicker for me was that I actually met the guy who ran it, and
Wow.
that's kind of what made
Was
me.
that before or after? Did you punch him or kiss him?
Oh, God, that was kind of like right in the middle. I guess that was like the honeymoon phase. Like, and
Okay.
and the worst
Like you
thing
still
is
had
like.
hope, right?
Yeah,
That this
yeah.
would work
Oh,
out.
definitely. Oh no. The worst thing about it is I already had money in, but after meeting him, that's when like I threw even more money at it, which was what a terrible idea. But anyway, I will mention his name. It was Nolan Bushnell, which some people know, but people if they don't know him, they definitely know the companies that he was behind. Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. I mean, these are big time companies, and
Wow,
he could
big
have even
names.
invested in Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak with Apple. I mean, there's a whole history on the internet, but it was serendipitous that I met him. But for my bank account, it was probably the worst thing that could ever happen because I kind of threw out all the fundamental analysis and even like the macro. Oh, I mean, what a great learning experience to lose all your money. I mean, like I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember this was like 2007 going into 2009. So like even if the company worked better and like they did have their problems, it probably still would have failed because that was just such a bad time for all companies. So like I was throwing money into it as the stock was going down, which is like one of the worst things you can do when you really don't understand what's going on. Like I honestly, I'll say sometimes that is the best thing you can do, but you really want to know what's going on if you're doubling down as it goes down. With Uwink, it was one of the like best learning experiences, despite losing all those nice profits I had from Nintendo. It's like it's almost like it wasn't real money. It goes up. I turned it into real money, but it turned right back into another stock. But this one didn't work out so well.
Wow. Okay. So after that, were you like completely just disappointed in investing altogether? Did you try to build yourself up? How did you recover from that?
That it's a great question because basically ever since I got interested in finance and stocks, I was also interested in starting businesses, and it was kind of like a back and forth a little bit. And I definitely failed with a bunch of businesses while the stocks were working. And I guess that's kind of the story of my like short adult life is like one thing's working or not working, miraculously the other thing is working. And so
That's
as
good.
I was failing with Uwink, I actually started this Facebook game company with a friend from high school, which seems totally different, but there is this weird video game thing that kind of fits all of this. Like Uwink had some games Nintendo did, it was definitely an interest of mine. Somehow that took off just as Uwink was failing. So it was definitely a big roller coaster ride, and I could get into all of that on another interview. But that's an important point that like I had the stock thing going on and I had the entrepreneurship thing going on, kind of back and forth.
That's good and lucky because some people really never recover.
Yeah. Oh
Sometimes
yeah. I
they
feel
put all
very
their life
lucky.
savings into something that's very risky. and
Yeah.
then all sorts of things happen. But I'm really glad that at least, whether by luck or not, you had something else to fall
I'm glad
back
too.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so let's get into the mining stocks
Oh,
because
sure.
you were mostly involved in gaming, and that's just what, like you were drawn to, I believe. How would you go from that to like mining? It seems like mining is just completely off the wall and mostly, for like older gentlemen with beards and mustaches. How did you get into like mining stocks?
Oh wow! I'm glad you mentioned gaming into mining because I have kind of like a weird aspect of it, and then I have a simple one. I'll start with the weird one. Like this was really interesting with the Facebook games. The way that you'd make money is with virtual currency. And I started to get fascinated by like how there are these in-game economies. And I've always been interested in like, economics kind of in general. But I think that was an important catalyst. I mean, it was crazy how people could start to think that, virtual coins could be worth real money because that's what it was. I mean, people would pay real money to buy, little guns in a mafia game or, swords in a fantasy game. And that's what our business was. And I know Bitcoin, wasn't out at the time, but there's a similarity there. But that was one catalyst. But the one that's much simpler is just the economy was looking really bad, especially going into like 2010, 2011. And what was like a few of the things that were doing really well? Well, mining stocks, silver, and gold. And I wasn't even really aware of the mining stocks at that time, but it's very important to realize silver and gold, just like those were kind of new concepts to me. I always thought people were crazy that were into that, but you start seeing things on YouTube, you start seeing news, and the real kicker was like in 2011, those things just went wild. Like both of them at different times went parabolic. So I kind of wanted to get out of the business I was in and actually, jump more into learning this stuff. So I think that a little bit of it was what I learned in business, but a lot of it was the macro picture of, what was going on as I was reading the news. Yeah.
Cool. And so you sound like you bought gold and silver at the top like me.
Yes. Oh,
Losers
yeah.
unite.
Yeah.
Bag holders unite.
Yeah.
And then obviously you got more interested into the mining stocks, as I said. And I've told my subscribers this a million times. When gold goes up 1%, gold miners go up 2, 3, 4, 5%. How do you actually pick your stocks? Because somebody that's just sitting at home and watching this video is thinking, okay, maybe I would like to get started into, investing in the sector. What is the thought process like? And I know you do it very differently to the way I do it. So let's hear it.
Oh, yeah. We could spend so much time on this. I'm going to try to break it down, at least like how I kind of got deeper into it. When I started, I was looking at the largest producing miners. Like that's what made sense. Those are the ones that were listed on the U.S. exchanges. So I didn't need to get, like a special brokerage or something to trade, smaller juniors. And evaluating those in some ways is not too different from other stocks. Like you actually have PE ratios and they're making money. As time went on, I discovered the two other major parts of stocks. And some people don't even realize that there's three, at least in my opinion, there's three very, you could even say four very different types of stocks. There's producers, developers, and explorers. And then when I say four, I was thinking like royalty companies. I'm not going to get into that either.
I was thinking prospect generators. So
prospect generator. Oh, that's five. Yeah, actually, no,
let's
that is a good
simplify.
point.
Let's leave it at 3 for now.
Okay. Well, so as I got deeper into it, I started to get more and more into those smaller ones. At first, the developers, but then really the explorers, and that's where I wouldn't say I'm like a super expert, but I realized it's actually the hardest area for even the people who are supposed to be experts, like the veterans who've been doing this for 20 or 30 years, to really know what's going on. And so when I look at explorers, you have to start getting into drill results, and that's something I don't necessarily have expertise in, but I've at least surrounded myself with different resources. One I'll come back to later is CEO.ca. That's one of the areas where we kind of have chatted a little bit, and I've met a lot of people on there. That's definitely worth anybody who's like a newbie should definitely check that out. But also a big thing for me was like, where is the area that I could have some type of competitive advantage? And if there's one thing I would actually point out, it's understanding geopolitics and looking at different jurisdictions. And it's amazing in some ways, but that is an area that I think is just becoming more and more important, because if you're really looking at explorers, all the best discoveries happen in the scariest places that haven't been explored before. Whether it's because it's just hard to work with those governments, or there were civil wars, or other stuff. But like, I am so fascinated by that stuff, and I realize there's a huge gap in knowledge there. So that's something where I can read a lot of books, or I can read a lot of news, and kind of become an expert on different countries. And that's, in a way, that's become my bread and butter, is like trying to figure out which of those countries are kind of like going from a low base of like, they're a couple years ago they were really scary, and then they're like starting to get better, and then a few years from now it's like, oh, everyone's going to be like, why didn't I think of that country? So like, I'd say that's kind of like my main thing. Yeah.
Okay, so you go for the geopolitical places, or the geopolitical knowledge that most people are completely unaware of, and you're a contrarian within a contrarian sector because you're thinking, okay, everybody wants to, drill holes in Canada and in Australia and all these safe jurisdictions. Meanwhile, say like West Africa, which is, I know, a place that you really have an interest for, most people aren't really looking at that area. Why? What are the reasons for people to just not want to invest there?
Oh, yeah, excellent question. Part of it is just general ignorance, or just, lack of curiosity. So many times I've brought up, quote unquote, Africa to like people who are, who've been in the industry for even decades, whether they're speculators or whether they're mining CEOs. And a lot of them just dismiss it. They don't even think of the countries being different. Like there's any, like they think all of Africa is just like
Just one
bad.
Africa.
Oh yeah. And then that is ridiculous in itself. But then like once you start digging into it, you realize like these countries have like their own cycles. I mean, some of them really, like the information is on the internet, but like you won't even find necessarily that much on mining, because because there's so few companies that have even like made a discovery or put a mine into production, and so I love it that West Africa seems to be this convergence of a lot of those themes. There are clearly countries that I've picked out within West Africa that are doing better than they were 5 years ago, but a lot of people think they're kind of all at the same level. There's also clearly great geology there that some people completely recognize, but a lot of people, I don't know, they haven't looked into the geology because they can't get over the geopolitical side. And then on top of that, the real kicker right now is like, we could be having this conversation a year ago and people would think I'm totally insane or something. But like right now, the last 6 months, like one of the hottest countries is Burkina Faso. Like a lot of the biggest companies are, acquiring the smaller companies there, getting a stake, or some of the best discoveries are happening there, and that's just one of the countries. But like that's what's amazing, is that it seems to be happening right now, and at least even though the story's not over yet, I got really interested a few years ago, and so in a lot of ways, the last 6 months have validated my interest. And like you said, kind of being a contrarian within like a contrarian industry, because mining really is a contrarian industry. So no, I appreciate the way you said that. And hopefully that kind of gives people an idea of what I think, not necessarily Africa, but like finding things that are contrarian within a contrarian industry. That's how you potentially make a lot of money here. Yeah.
Cool. And how do you go about actually, finding the companies that have an interest in that area specifically, and how do you sort them out? I mean, I'm sure there is a lot of good stocks and not so good stocks, amazing stocks? How do you define what is really important for you? And how did you get to, first of all, know about these particular countries or these particular stocks? Because I'm assuming there's no like West Africa mining stock exchange that you can just pick through.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back to kind of a big light bulb for me was just in 2014 was when I really started to get into the juniors, and I realized there's thousands of stocks, listed in Canada, listed in Australia, and there's even a bunch listed in London. So like you have three different exchanges. And that was interesting in itself, just to know that some people, all they do is cover one exchange. They don't realize the other exchange exists. Like Australians only do the Australian exchange, and then Canadians only do the Canadian exchange. And so like that's a difference right there. But then specifically with Africa, out of any part of the world, you actually have a significant amount of companies listed on all three exchanges that are in Africa. And so that was worth just kind of like skimming. I guess I'll take a step back. It's like if I got interested in a country, you could do a Google search and just start finding like companies will come up. But the ones I really like to see are the ones that have the tiny market caps. And since the last 6 months have been so good, a lot of those market caps have multiplied. So it's really hard to find under 5 million. I mean that's like really tiny, like under 5 million Canadian dollars, Australian dollars. But even if we're talking under 10 million, I still like love finding those because a lot of times like when you find a company like that, there might only be a handful of other people in the world who are even paying attention. Like it's too small for institutions. It's even too small for a lot of people in the industry who consider it, something that small to be too risky, or they have too much money, and just it's like they have too much money to get into it. So if you're like a newbie or if you're something, that's great. But if I was going to add one other thing that's just essential is once you do that research, like you go online and you just start finding companies and you start filtering out the small ones. It's essential to call them up. At least for me, that's been one of the biggest things.
Hold on. I'm a millennial. I need translation. You actually pick up the phone and call the CEOs or the investor relations guy in those companies, in those publicly listed companies.
So you don't actually have to pick up a phone. I mean, you can use Skype. Like that. But yes, you need to talk. I've never actually tried to text a CEO. Like that might be a little weird doing that. But yeah, like you call these guys up, and what's cool, at least me being in the U.S., like it's kind of fun to realize some of these guys are in Canada, but then like some of them are in Australia or they're in London, and it was kind of scary at first because like it's like, oh, do these guys really want to talk to me? But that was like the most fun of all, is realizing sometimes these guys give you a lot of time. Like you're the only person calling them. And like I remember calling a couple CEOs and thinking, oh, I'll be lucky to get 10 minutes. And we had like an hour and a half conversation. Wow. And they gave me so much good information. Like and I should also take a step back. Like you always want to see what's on a company's website. I mean, PowerPoints are great. Like you get an idea of their marketing, and you get an idea of just a basic gist of a company. But like once you do that, calling them up is a great next step. And then if you get into the nitty gritty, you can go into the regulatory filings like SADAR in Canada, and then there's Australia has a different one. But anyway, like calling these guys up, that's something a lot of people don't do. And the smaller the company is, not only the more important I think it is for us as speculators to try doing that, but the more valuable the information you'll get will be. So absolutely, if you didn't get anything else out of like this talk between us, like that I think is one of the most important, and actually not that many people in the industry do it.
I'm sure not that many people do it at all, or even think that they're gonna, like you said, that they're gonna pick up the phone and want to talk to you. But is there anything specifically that you look for when you call these companies up? Are you trying to see if there's confidence in what they're saying? Like how do you measure? What are you looking for when you call them? Is what I want.
Oh yeah, great, excellent question. And I always try to have not just a full question list, but kind of figuring out what are the potential red flags that I see from their PowerPoints or from their recent news releases. And so most important to me is just figuring out, do they have like some clear strategy? Like what is the plan 6 months, a year, even 5 years down the road? sometimes it's okay if there's not a clear plan. Like it's almost like you got maybe 5 or 10 different factors, and one of the most important is the plan. But if their plan isn't clear, but there's other aspects that are good, it might counterbalance it. But I'm trying to see if there's a clear alignment with how they present themselves versus what they're saying on the phone. I like also just how they respond to me. I can tell if other people have been calling them, or if really like I'm the only person. It's always better if I'm like the only one. Like I literally could be the first person buying at the bottom. Like I love that feeling. It's like I'm the only person doing that, and I definitely have examples of that. But there's a lot of other things that you just kind of get in the habit of. Like the first time you call them, it's like, oh man, like do I really want to ask them all of this? But like kind of confirming insider ownership. Confirming, what their future plans are. Like are they going to be more about drilling or about acquiring land? How good is their marketing? Like, what are they going to spend their marketing budget on? Oh, and I should bring that up. That's one of the more important things too to me that I don't think necessarily would fit a lot of the listeners here. But I actually love it when they're good at almost everything except for marketing themselves.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah. So this is where kind of like my entrepreneurial side comes in, and people might think this is kind of kooky, but it's totally worked. I love it when a company is good at like they've got the technical background. They even they know how to do dealings with in the industry. Like they know how to get interest from institutional investors. They know how to work with other people. But what they really don't understand is working with retail investors like you or me, like the little people. And when that's the case, a lot of times like these companies, maybe they were trading at like $1 per share a few years ago at the top of the cycle, but they came all the way down to like 5 cents or even 3 cents or 2 cents. And what they need are people like us to bring that up. Like we're the only ones that are listening to them. And so, and I will give a specific example. Like this is actually excellent timing. Just a quick interject my own talk is to mention I couldn't believe it. Like today on CEO.ca, I must have had like 10 people thank me for mentioning Sarama Resources, and like I'm not trying to sell you this now because it's already gone up so much, but back, a year and a half ago, it completely fits what I'm describing. I think they were good at every single thing except they had difficulty, talking or promoting themselves to retail investors, to little people. And so, I've gone out of my way to like try to figure out how to do that. I've used CEO.ca, which is an excellent tool to learn, but also to promote. I made my own YouTube video, using my YouTube channel, which I wasn't sure how that worked out, but by all measures, of account, it's worked out really well. And like, I didn't need to be paid for it because I already owned stock in the company. So it's like, I'm thinking of myself as kind of a partner in the ownership, even though I could, buy more or sell more at any time. I think that's a very interesting mentality to have when you're looking at these small companies. I don't think that way when I put money into the bigger ones, which I do as well. But for me, that's kind of, again, like it's like the bread and butter. Like this, it's even more special because I'm finding a company that seems like it's at its lowest point and they're struggling to get out of that. But if I can help them and maybe, have more influence on it, like that's what makes it worth spending all that extra time. Because if that small company can get out of that rut, they're good at everything else. So instead of getting like a 5-bagger, they get like a 10-bagger or a 20-bagger. Like that's kind of my hope. So you asked really good questions because you got really to the heart of what I really enjoy and what I'm hoping I can find more companies like that. Yeah.
Cool. So let me see if I can sort of like rephrase your mentality. Okay. So for you, there's like a double benefit into finding the lesser known companies with great projects, with weak marketing at the time when you're trying to buy them. One, because you do believe that they're going up and you have proven yourself because they are going up as we speak, literally. And not only that, but you get the benefit of being the guy who made that choice, who was proven right. And I'm not even sure that you noticed this, but that makes you into just almost like an expert, because you positioned yourself as the one guy who was talking about that specific stock. And then maybe a few people listened, maybe other people didn't, but now you're being proven right when everybody else was probably pointing at the common stocks that everybody knows about. And so that's like more beneficial, not just the financial side, but there's always, that little that little victory that you can claim, like I picked this one stock, everybody wants to get in. That's awesome. Is that right? Did I get it kind of right?
Oh yeah, that's a great rephrasing. And like some people say, this is all about money. Like it's all, none of the other stuff matters. But you were totally right. Like it feels really good to be like that person that kind of puts them over the top. Yeah.
You're into gaming, so this is sort of a game too, right? You gotta win.
Oh yeah. You're right. Yeah,
you gotta win for sure.
Yeah. I guess I'll just add, like, I don't know, what else I would do in the industry. Like, what's cool is that it's so wide open right now. And I guess this is kind of like something that's great for the viewer. Like there's so much inefficiency here that, like, even if you didn't want to be a stock picker and do all this stuff privately, because what I'm doing right now, even though I'm doing all this promotion, it's just my money that I put in. Like, I don't have any special connections to the company. If you wanted to, you could become your own expert. And like, I don't love that word, but really it doesn't take much to be an expert in something that no one else is interested in. If you're the only person that like knows a certain company or a certain region, you kind of become, the expert by default. So just to be clear, like there's so many opportunities in this industry, whether you're teaching new people or whether you're helping companies promote, or whether you're doing more like what I'm doing right now with your own money. Because like who knows, I may end up doing some type of side business, but like for me, like my own YouTube channel is more just to meet other people like yourself, Fabi. Like that's what's cool is like I didn't even know Fabi like a week ago. So like who knows, where this could lead, but like really it's just cool that this industry is so wide open. It's almost like, and like we're hoping more young people come in because like it is totally ripe for that. So I just wanted to add that point.
Exactly. I think it's very fitting for young people because it's we have a lot of time to work through the cycles. We can wait a couple of years until a resource gets more love from the market and actually goes up. And so I think it should be totally like a millennial play. People our age should be completely diving into the sector, and it's so profitable too. I mean, okay, I respect all the people who have Facebook all-time highs right now. Congratulations. But if you see any of the mining stocks that we're invested into, you're going to know that Facebook, it doesn't have much more to go.
Yeah.
Right? There's only so much you can gain with a stock that everybody knows about and everybody knows that it's a great company.
Exactly.
So that's how we can really profit. Okay, so I want to just compare how you do it and the niche that you've picked within the sector, contrast that with the way I do it because it's completely different. And then I want to go back because I want to get some book recommendations for me because you're the mining book guy, so I can't let you off the hook. So what I do basically, and there is a good side and a bad side to the way that I do this as well, is instead of actually focusing on one region or actually doing very deep research into lesser known stocks, what I do is basically I look at the sector as a whole and I look for the people who are considered to be experts. So I go and find out who within the sector, who is the Rick Rule of this, the Ross Beaty, the Marin Katusa, the Bob Quartermain, who are the top people. And for this to work, maybe I'll do a separate video to go deeper into this. You have to know that the top people, they show up everywhere, okay? And that doesn't just mean they show up in all the interviews, they show up in all the news, because there are some people that show up all the time and they're really not great people. Their results aren't really that great. But the good people recommend the best people as well. So it's almost as if they're their own little mafia at the top, right? I mean, if you go and see Rick Rule, he will talk positive things about Doug Casey, and then he'll talk positive things about Ross Beaty, and then Ross Beaty will talk about somebody else. And after realizing who is who in this market, you can say, okay, so these are the top guys who have allegedly made millions upon millions of dollars within this industry. And then what I do is I track them, and then I'll teach you how to do that in a different video. I track what they're buying, and especially if we're going down the cycle and we haven't really taken off yet, then I just basically buy what they're buying. And there are a few reasons for this, which work, but they're completely the opposite to what Nick just said. One of the reasons is because I believe that the big guys have already vetted a lot of the things that I cannot possibly get expertise in. For example, I will never know as much geology as some of the top geologists in the field. First, I'm not really interested. It's not like I wasn't born for it. I mean, surely if I found gold in the ground, I would probably become an instant avid follower of everything geology. But it's just not my main expertise. And so what I do is I follow the big guys because I know that they have the best geologists on their side, and chances are that they have already vetted the projects that they're putting their money into. So that's one of the factors. The other thing, and this is the marketing flip side to what Nick just said, is that I know that with these guys, they are the marketing of their own stocks. And so you can see sometimes a Ross Beaty will come in and buy, I don't know how many million shares of any company whatsoever. And the day the information comes out, the stock goes up 10%. Now, this will only happen if we're starting to actually, get bids, if the resource is going up, and if those stocks are going up with it, if there's the beginning at least of a bull market. What is interesting is that when there's a downturn and nobody's interested in mining stocks, there isn't very much of a move. Rick Rule can say, hey, I'm buying all of this stock in this company, and nothing happens. And that's when I come in and I buy it, because I know that eventually when the bull market starts to run, Rick Rule is going to keep talking about the stock because he's already bought it at a much lower price. And then everybody's going to be like, oh, yeah, that's true. Rick Rule bought the stock. Let's go and buy it. And that's how you get price appreciation. Not that that's all there is to it, but that's just a flip side as well. Because when you're trying to find something, you got to be smart about how will people know about this. And Nick did the opposite, and it worked as well. And the thing is, he is actually aware of the marketing need. And that goes into his decision-making process. So he knows that there is a need for future marketing. And it works. It has worked for me. It has worked very well for Nick as well. So those are some of the differences that we find, and both work. There is no right and wrong. I think more than anything, you have to find out what you're better at. Are you willing to be like me? I'm a complete stalker. I can find just about any piece of information about anybody. So if you put a nasty comment on my YouTube channel, I might just find out your address.
Ooh, creepy.
No, I'm only joking. But I'm much more skilled in finding the who's who and what they're buying and what the chit chat is, than doing the deep research about one area or one specific type of company, because I'm just not that knowledgeable. That's where Nick comes in. Nick is a guy that can read for hours and hours and hours on a topic that he is interested in. And speaking of which, Nick, like I said, is there anything that you would recommend us to read? Is there anything that you say everybody should read this if they want to get into mining or geopolitical issues? What would you recommend us?
Ooh, so yeah, they could go in a lot of directions. So you've already recommended one. This is actually funny. Like, I only kind of met you because I saw my name pop up on CEO.ca, and it was you posting one of your videos, and it was
I stalk.
on.
That's what I do.
Yeah. No, but that was really cool. And I saw, like, you mentioned the big score, and really that happens to be, right up there in terms of like top books, I think, in terms of mixing together like the business side and the technical side, and it's a really fun story. And then you learn about a guy who literally was on his way to making billions, Robert Friedland. I mean, it's got everything. I think it's an exciting story, and I think you'll really enjoy it. But hopefully, other people here consider getting that book, because that's a good litmus test of like, if you enjoy that stuff, you're going to like this industry. I'll throw out a couple other names. Hemlo. I forgot. I have a couple copies. Oh yeah. By the way, this is kind of my book, my little library back here.
We're jealous.
Yeah, I mean, I could just look here and pick a bunch, but there's one on Hemlo. It's actually a good YouTube movie as well.
I saw the video, and probably you're talking about the book that's related to that same story.
Yeah,
right?
and I'll just briefly. A lot of Americans have no awareness of it, but Hemlo was one of the great discoveries in Canada for gold. In Ontario, and that's a great story as well. It's a pretty quick read. Like I'm hoping to find kind of like the next Hemlo, but some other far off place of the world, because you're probably not going to find that in Canada again. But on the other end, absolutely pick up some type of book on Bre-X. And there's a few different ones. I've made one YouTube video on it, but what's so important is that Bre-X is the quintessential fraud, and you want to know what the warning signs are. So like in some ways, learning the deep disaster, and this was in 96 going into 97, like the whole industry kind of collapsed because of the Bre-X disaster. And I won't give away all the points, but you must learn something on Bre-X. Oh, and to your point, like, see, if you don't want to read books, there's always some type of movie coming out. Because I know you mentioned the Gold movie with Matthew McConaughey, which is hilarious.
Finally.
That like he's going to be this like fat balding guy. I don't know how much it's going to be based exactly on the true story, but I'm sure it'll be really exciting. And I saw that you mentioned it's coming out at Christmas. I mean, that is kind of the Bre-X story. So like, what's cool is you can read a book or you can see a movie. But like that's one that you should definitely be aware of. Like, those are kind of the three main mining books, and there's a whole bunch of others. On geopolitics, I'd say is a little trickier to pick up on, but there's plenty of books that are kind of about specific countries, and I think that's worth reading if you get deeper into that. And there's all sorts of books about the specific players. I actually have one I haven't even read yet, but like this kind of ties into Hemlo. But there's like a bunch of books about people like this. The Pez. This is Murray Pezim, and he was one of
that guy.
He was one of the guys who benefited greatly from Hemlo. I mean, like, and he's a great example of someone who's a real House Street hustler from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And there's all sorts of wacky characters. And even though back in the day there was no internet, a lot of the things are the same. Like you got the same like wheeler dealers, and they're just doing it, in person or over the phone lines instead of doing it online. So like, it's a great industry because it's so cyclical. You can learn so much from these old books, and so that is a great point. It's like in technology, you can't read something 50 years ago and learn about, how do you find the next Facebook. But with mining, you can read something from 20 years ago, 50 years ago, even 100 years ago, and you will learn something that's relevant today. So that's kind of where the whole mining book guy thing comes in. I think it's a great thing to get into. Yeah.
And some of these sites of 100 years ago are now trying to be revived, right? Some of the gold that's still there, people are saying, hey, we should dig it up because there's more gold that we weren't able to see 100 years ago. That's amazing. Super cyclical sector, and so there's always the same thing coming around the corner, and that's what I find interesting. You just have to know the different stages and know how to get in and how to get out, or when to get in, when to get out. Right. I want to wrap this up with, tell us your favorite country out of West Africa, because many people here might have that thought that, hey, Africa is just Africa, it's all one thing. What is your favorite country and why?
Oh man, it's a good question, because you're having me like kind of give up one of my secrets. Like, it's not a secret.
I'm asking you to pick one of your kids.
Yeah. So like a lot of people know that I really like Burkina Faso, but that's become really obvious. Like, I mean, it's still a great place to look, but that was more of a story maybe 5 or 10 years ago if you really like wanted to pick something that's going to build momentum. Well, right now, absolutely, it's Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire. It depends on where you're from in the world, what you call it. But what's great about it is that they had a civil war and had a bunch of wars going back 5 years, going back further. And so it kind of like people just assumed that was going to continue. Well, guess what? The last 4 or 5 years have been great. And, say what you want about the president, but he has a clear vision to turn Ivory Coast, into an emerging economy. I mean, like a lot of people don't even think of most African countries as being, emerging, but I really think it could become the powerhouse of West Africa. They're investing in infrastructure. They were smart enough to realize that they wanted to get a little bit away from cocoa, which was one of their, their mainstays in terms of exports, and they were quick on getting on gold. And the thing is, almost all the explorers there are only Australian listed. And so a lot of Canadians aren't even aware of the opportunity. Unfortunately, there just aren't that many companies in there yet, but it is one of my favorite countries because I think there's going to be more. You do see some activity, and I think in a lot of ways they can kind of copy what Burkina Faso is doing right now, like a few years and you'll talk about it. So that's one I love following, even though I don't currently own any like amazing companies there. That's my favorite.
Yet.
And yet.
Things could still be in the pipeline. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So Ivory Coast, guys, you got it. Hot tip. Ivory Coast turning chocolate bars into gold bars. Not a very difficult decision to make. I mean, you must imagine that gold will get you more money. Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. I will definitely have you back on so we can talk more about these books, about Africa, about investing, about all sorts of things investing. Thank you so much. Take care. See you.
Thanks, Fabi.